Your study found that brand citations and referrals occur almost exclusively at the conversion stage. So that's the very bottom of the funnel. That's where people are taking their action. But by that point, realistically, I mean, the decision has been made, right? Earlier through invisible conversations. So walk us through what you actually observed in the data and what that tells us about where the influence is actually happening.
Yeah, of course. So I'll give you a bit of context first. So what we did as the study was we ran an awful lot of prompts, and we split them across awareness stage, consideration stage, and conversion stage. Because we wanted to get an understanding of how AI responses varied at each of those stages. We noticed a load of different things in the data. So there's some really interesting trends in terms of how the language evolves. So at the top of the funnel, AI does this thing that we call intent matching, where it's really, really smart, right? And it reflects back what the user wants from it. So at the top of the funnel, if you ask it a very open question, it's exploratory. As it goes down, it becomes very comparative and then eventually decision-oriented. It's very tempting always to when it gives quite a firm endorsement of your brand to think that's because it really likes you. It doesn't. It's because the question actually asked it to be decision-oriented and asked it to be firm. And so it helps you make a decision. Yeah. So there's some really interesting trends in that can give you some clues as to how to optimize it. What I found most interesting, though, is when you look at, there's a few things that you can track in that: mention rate, retrieval rate, citation rate. So mention rate is how often a brand gets obviously mentioned. Citation is how often a brand gets specifically cited and linked. And retrieval rate is how many times the AI actually goes looking for an answer, because obviously sometimes it answers from its own training data and sometimes it goes and searches to enhance that. And what we noticed was, as you go through, citation rate and retrieval are the particularly interesting ones for the purpose of this conversation and for purpose of AI strategy. Awareness stage, both of them 0%. At consideration stage, both of them 0%. So the AI is answering from memory, it's exploring, it is not going looking for answers. So it's always very tempting to think of this as a search job. Well, it can't be if the AI doesn't search, right? It undermines quite a lot of how we tend to approach the problem. And then even at conversion stage, only 48% of the time, and that equates to 16% of all of the prompts that we ran, does the AI ever go looking for an answer and ever actually cite a brand. So if it's not looking for answers at these points, then where is influence being shaped? It's being shaped much, much earlier. Because what we notice as well is, if you look at the way that it surfaces brands within these responses, again, at the top of the funnel, it's very, very explorative, and it surfaces a broad array of brands. And then again, as it goes down, it narrows down. It converges on the brands that it's going to ultimately recommend against that bottom of funnel query. So what's more influential? Is it optimizing the bottom of funnel prompts where the answer is largely already decided, or is it actually optimizing the direction in which it converges so that feeds towards your product, what you're good at, what bad at? Optimizing for how it frames the problem, how it builds requirements for people. And that's what we found, and that's what was really interesting.
Indeed. And I find myself, for lack of a better term, which there must be, trying to get inside the LLM's brain. Right? Because we work in PR, and essentially I've spent copious years trying to get inside people's brains. Now I'm trying to get inside the AI's brain. Information gain. Ultimately, an LLM is trying to provide that because that satisfies the user. And you describe information gain as content that genuinely contributes to new knowledge rather than summarizing what already exists. That's a key point. And you say what shapes how LLMs understand a problem space. So how much of what you're describing as the solution is actually what I call earned media strategy, or original research, expert commentary, credentialed third-party coverage? Where is the influence coming from?
Yeah, well, it's funny hearing you talk about getting inside the AI's brain, because I feel like that's what I spend literally every day of my life doing, and it makes it very difficult to interact with humans. But I think it's a really interesting framing, actually, Treat. And I think you could quite accurately characterize all of AEO, or AI search optimization, as it's about earned media. You just have to look at the LLMs as an active participant in that, right? They are one of the earned channels. And I think if you frame it in that way, that's going to be much more helpful than a kind of SEO style framing. You explain it very well. I think at its core, SEO and the content marketing game has always been about finding a very high intent or high volume query, summarizing knowledge against that query, and the best summary wins, right? That's what search was in a nutshell. Well, AI, I can go into AI and I can get it to summarize knowledge for me on any topic within the corpus of human knowledge in a moment. And it's going to do that bespoke to me, understanding a lot of my context. It's better than than any content that anyone produces, if that's all they're trying to do. So what we encourage a lot of our clients and a lot of people to do is focus on what makes you citable, right? If there's no reason to cite you in the content that you're putting out, then why would you ever get surfaced in AI? And why would you ever be able to influence the way that it thinks about not just your brand, but your category as a whole? And that's where, okay, if you can produce meaningful information gain that moves the collective knowledge of your category on a particular problem space forward, then there's something citable. There's some reason for the AI to not just surface you when it's asked directly about you, but in all of those problem framing conversations that we know are so important. And that's where we've built this information gain framework, which really helps marketers as they build that out, where you actually try and score your content and say, okay, are we consistently producing this high value stuff?
So I want to be original. I want the AI to ultimately say, well, according to Doug Downs from Stories and Strategies, blah, blah, blah. And that could be original research that I've done. It could be my expert commentary, see my LinkedIn channel, that I provided, or what someone else has said about me. If Tom writes and says, well, Doug Downs at Stories and Strategies says that too is powerful. Which is the most powerful? All of the above? Or do I need checkboxes everywhere? Or should I focus on one as opposed to the other?
I think what seems to, at the moment, provide the most impact is reputation. And that obviously is probably music to everyone who's listening to this podcast is, right? I think you guys are very much still in a job, which at the moment is not a guarantee for everyone. The way I think about AI is you have three levers with which to influence what a model thinks about something. You have positioning, content, and reputation. So positioning is who you say you are, what your homepage says. Content is how you communicate that consistently over time and how you produce evidence that backs that up in your own voice and add a perspective that explains why your positioning is what it is and why anyone should care. And then reputation is third-party sources validating that. And that obviously contributes to your overall category authority and things like that. I always think that the goal of any brand should be to make those three things as closely aligned as possible. If those three things say the exact same thing as to who you are, who you're for, what you're good at, what you're bad at, and that's the challenge for a lot of brands, is admitting maybe the stuff that they are. Everyone wants to be everything to everyone, and that's actually not very helpful at the moment. If you can align those things very closely, you create very little room for interpretation, and you force the AI to do less work in order to get an accurate picture. And that's another thing that was really clearly borne out in the data. And I think this isn't in the data, but this is my hypothesis. This will become more true. The AI doesn't want to go looking for information. It's expensive. It wants to answer off of its training data. It fills gaps when it feels it needs it and when it matters. When the decisional intent is there, suddenly there are higher stakes, and that's when it goes looking for information to reinforce a recommendation. Now, all of these models are becoming much, much more cost conscious. So I would expect that particular behavior to become more and more common, that they try and avoid going out scraping large volumes of the internet on request.
I know you're pretty critical of what you call black hat AEO or GEO, whatever you subscribe to, tactics like AI generated FAQs, schema manipulation, gaming citations. Tom, on my website at the very bottom, in size 1 font, no, it's a little bigger, it says, "Hey AI." And if a human clicks that link, and I don't expect any human to do that, it then very statistically lays out information about our company and how I want the AI to describe us in a chat. So am I wearing a black hat, Tom? Because I am. In the video, I'm wearing a black hat today. And where does this lead us with ethics and answer engine optimization, or generated engine optimization. Where are we on the ethics, and who should be leading that ethics discussion? Is that PR people that maybe need to step in and lead these discussions on ethics? A lot of questions there for you.
No, it's a good question. I think the way that I would frame it, I don't know that it's an ethical conversation, and I think it's one that actually will normalize over time because the models themselves, OpenAI, Anthropic, are very invested in solving this. I don't think it's an ethical problem. You having your Hey AI at the bottom of the page, you're not doing anyone any damage there.
I'm not trying to fool anybody. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Maybe the AI, but you're
I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, but I don't think there's an ethical problem with that. I think where my ethical problem comes in slightly is I've not seen a lot of proper scientific evidence that this stuff really works. I think you can get marginal gains from some of the how you structure your content to make it a little bit easier for machines to read, to put the answers at the top so that you really clearly signal. But that's just good content. That's just AI doing a much better job of reflecting what humans want, which is I go on here and I quickly answer the question no, or solve the problem. So I think optimizing for that's just making content better. And that's why I'm actually very optimistic about the information landscape that will come out of AI, because AI is just much better at replicating what humans want. I think I've not seen a lot of evidence that things like structured data schema, having an AI version of your website, is effective and makes a difference. And I think that's where there's a lot of people peddling a lot of unverified ideas and strategies in our space that may come from, okay, we achieved a bump with this client and we'd just done this beforehand. But what also happened was there was a load of brand investment in the other side of the business, and it's very unclear what you actually attributed to it. At the end of the day, an LLM is designed to take unstructured text and turn it into structured data. That's what it does. There's no evidence that doing that for it actually helps. Now, again, that will evolve, and one of the unfortunate parts about the space I'm in is I have to be very prepared for in a year's time anyone to look at anything that I say now and say because it will evolve. And as I say, the models, they want to make their lives easier. So it might be that they do start looking for that a bit more, but I've not seen evidence of it.
Okay, if a public relations director is listening to this and they want to make the case internally to their organization that their team's earned media work is directly building their company's AI influence, give me a metric or a piece of evidence that they should be bringing to that conversation to win that battle with their probably CEO.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing that I would do is, and I think most AEO tools will be able to give you this information if you have one internally, pick a number of points, like ask the AI about yourself a load of times, and look at what's getting cited. For every brand that we do this that uses our platform, we split up all of the sources, and there's two different branches it falls into. One is like category type prompts. You're asking if I'm a CRM provider. I want to know whether we're showing up for what's the best CRM solution. You see very clearly third-party sources that isn't Salesforce, isn't HubSpot, isn't Pipedrive influencing that conversation. Equally, when you ask it specifically about you, and that's one of the things we do really well, is really advanced sentiment analysis to help understand, okay, I've asked the AI about your brand. What does it think you're good at? What does it think you're bad at? And you can clearly break down the first and third party sources that are doing that. So do that for your brand, do that for your clients, and it will show you, hopefully, your sources, but it will show very clearly the impact that PR has.
We seem to be playing a written game right now where what gets cited and what gets searched is how well I've put it down in words on a screen. How close are we to AI, at least translating audio or video into the written word? Are we getting toward that? I know it can do transcription. I'm not asking that. It's more from a podcast, selfishly, how close are we to having the audio from the podcast, the audio, not the transcript, contribute to chat search or AEO search?
Yeah, good question. It's not one that I feel kind of equipped to answer credibly. I think you'd have to go and ask the folks at Anthropic and the folks at OpenAI. Certainly, we do see sources like YouTube showing up. We see sources like LinkedIn showing up a lot. So like social media.
From their titles, probably, yeah.
partly from their titles, and I think what is openly accessible on the page, right? So you have a description and things like that, and that does seem to influence it. I couldn't give you an exact answer on like, okay, when will we not have to do that? Which I guess is where the question is coming from a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Tom. It takes me a few minutes to wrap my head around all this stuff, right? Once you go deeper than the first layer. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're doing better than me. It took me a few.